this image, it's really very difficult to make out anything of this image. This is actually a very strange kind of movement which I found, like, because they used to express speed. They were in love of, they were having a lot of love for speed. Like, whatever was happening in that age, like, when this movement that became popular, actually the vehicles, these started coming, and this is the speed of a motorcycle, which like the poet has tried to draw the image of the speed of a motorcycle, and he has given this image the title, the speed of motorcycle. And this is an image which is made in 19, which was made, this painting was made in 1913, and this is representing the speed of a motorcycle. So futurism is basically, if the thing to which we can relate this futurism is mainly the speed and the sound also. So this is also the movement which, in which there is a lot of fragmentation, as it was there in expressionism. So predominantly painters and other visual arts, this was more important in paintings and visual arts from 1909 to 1914. It was popular. And then organized art movement, because it has a clear cut manifesto, and which is expressing through the manifesto, they are expressing their objectives in favor of technological advancements. They were in favor of technological advancements, love for action and movement. So like these were the writers or the painters or the artists, those who were in love for action and movement. So they, speed and violence were the favored vehicles of sensation, rather than lyricism, symbolism and high culture. So for them, this lyricism, symbolism and high culture, this was not at all important. For them it was speed, the violence, the action, movement, the things which actually appeal to our senses. And they supported war also, because they thought that something, that this war will bring something new, and they will be able to change their lives through war. So started in Italy, then in Russia, and then it became international. Literary futurism sought to develop a language appropriate for what they perceived to be the speed and ruthlessness of the early 20th century. So they are actually expressing the speed and ruthlessness of the early 20th century. In Italy, it started in Italy, in Italy it was led by the poet Marinetti, most influential and active between 1909, but was started by this Marinetti. He's restarted it after World War One also. Revival attracted many other writers and artists, and became known as second generation futurism. So now this Marinetti, he is the one who wrote the manifesto of this futuristic movement. In his futurist manifesto, 1909, in 1909, he wrote this, advocated words in freedom, a language unbound by common syntax and order. So they also didn't follow any syntax or any order. Marinetti calls for the reawakening of divine intuition that, after hours of relentless toil, allows for the creative spirit seems suddenly to shake off its shackles and become prey to its incomprehensible spontaneity of conception and execution. So they wanted to break all the shackles, and they wanted to free the mind in the same way as other schools were doing, but at the same time they were more inclined towards speed, sound, violence, and all these things they wanted. They were in favor of war also. Published a huge number of different manifestos, using them to communicate their aesthetic, political, and social ideas, to transmit their ideas to a wider audience. And Russian futurist poets profoundly influenced the development of Russian formalism. So later on, when this Russian formalism that came, like this Russian futurist poets, they influenced them. While in England, the futurist movement was expressed as vorticism by Ezra Pound and Wyndham Lewis in their Maxim Blast. So vorticism, this is another movement where we are not going to discuss it in detail, but this was the movement which actually emerged from this futurism. So these are the characteristics of this futurism, focused on progress and modernity. So this is base because this is the movement which was actually talking about speed and machines and wars and all this. So it actually focused on progress only. So fought to sweep away from traditional artistic notions and replace them with an energetic celebration of the machine age. So they actually wanted to celebrate whatever was happening around them in this machine age. Focus was placed on creating a unique and dynamic vision of the future, and artists incorporated portrayals of urban landscapes as well as new technologies such as trains, cars, and aeroplanes into their depiction. So they started describing trains, cars, and aeroplanes, speed, violence, and the working classes were all glorified by the groups as ways to advance change, and their work covered a wide variety of art forms, including architecture, sculpture, literature, theater, music, and even food. So they the basic thing is this one, that futurists, these were more inclined towards speed, violence, and all these things. They actually focused on progress and all those things which were happening in that age. So distinguished by scenes that are only a few sentences long, an emphasis on nonsensical humor. So this is how this futurism that was working in literature. So they were distinguished by scenes that are only a few sentences long. Okay, so an emphasis on nonsensical humor, attempts to examine and subvert tradition of theater via parody and other techniques. They didn't want to have that kind of traditional things, and they wanted to they wanted to bring changes in that. Longer forms of literature such as the novel have no place in the futurist aesthetics of speed and compression. So everything for them, like they were actually moving towards modernity, and they actually wanted to change everything, replace everything whatever was happening earlier. So they were in favor of speed, and they wanted compression also. And the long novels, as in other movements also we have seen that long novels or longer forms of literature, these were actually replaced by compression and conciseness. So futurist literature primarily focuses on seven aspects: intuition, irony, abolition of syntax, metrical reform, onomatopoeia is related to sound, and essential synthetic lyricism. So all these things were more important for them. Many Italian futurists supported fascism, and parallels can be drawn between the two movements. So we know that these futurists, as we have come to know, that they were in favor of war, and that's why they supported fascism also. Like the fascists, the futurists were strongly patriotic, and they were patriotic, and they were also patriotic, excited by violence and opposed to the parliament democracy. So they didn't want democracy, and they were excited by violence. When Mussolini took power in 1922, it brought futurism its official acceptance. But we know that fascism that didn't attract the world too much. And later on, what happened, and that's why these futurists, they also suffered a lot because of having their associations with this fascism. Because fascism, the reputation of fascism, that adversely affected the reputation of this futurists also. So they were also affected by the reputation of fascism. So these are the important features which they employed while writing their works. Yeah, irony. We know that earlier the writers, they were also using irony. So proved to be so old and forgotten that it looked almost new when the dust was brushed away from it. So they tried to change the form. The irony, it was used earlier, and they tried to change that irony. Then abolition of syntax, believed that the constraints of syntax were inappropriate to modern life, and that it did not truly represent the mind of the poet. And they didn't want to follow any kind of syntax. And then onomatopoeia, that became very popular, very important for them, because they boom, splash, tweet, this kind of sounds they were using. And then promoted a kind of hyper conciseness. This we have observed in the kind of in the works of almost in almost all the schools. They were following this kind of hyper conciseness.